Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's WOW webinar. My name is Sarah Malik, and I'm an Internal Marketing Associate with WhereWare. We're very excited to have James Guittard with us today. James is a Digital Project Manager here at WhereWare, and he'll be covering the topic of Google Analytics 101. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that we are recording this session, and we'll be sharing it with you via email and posting it to our blog within the next day. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please submit them through the chat box, and we'll answer a few at the end of the session. We have a lot of material to cover in about 20 minutes, so if we don't get to your question today, we'll follow up with you directly via email. We also encourage you to tweet along with us using the hashtag WowWebinar. And with that, I'll pass it over to James.
Hi, everyone. My name is James Guittard. I'm a Digital Project Manager here at WhereWare. Before I get started talking about Google Analytics, I'd like to talk a little bit about WhereWare. We are a digital full-service agency with about 20 years of experience in marketing automation, creating personalized websites, cloud-based solutions, mobile application development, data integration, analytics, as well as paid advertising, SEO, pay-per-click. And we work with a number of companies. I'm not going to name drop all of these people, but essentially we work in multiple industries, Fortune 500 companies down to small, medium businesses, in B2C, B2B arenas. And with that, let's go ahead and get started talking about Google Analytics. So on the agenda today, we're going to go over broadly what is GA and what's it about. We're going to talk about some terminology, learn the lingo, analyze and use actionable data. We'll follow that up with some tips and tricks and some final takeaways. So Google Analytics. What is GA and why do people use it? Number one, I think I'd like to point out an interesting fact that nearly 95% of the top 200 marketing websites in the world use Google Analytics for their marketing behavioral and aggregation, like collecting metrics and doing analysis. The reason I think for that is, number one, it's free. And for what you get for a free service, it's extremely powerful. It compares with some other platforms that frankly cost a lot of money, and it does a lot of what you really need it to out of the box with no fee associated with it at all. And because of that, it's extremely widely used, widely documented. You can find all sorts of great information about how to use it, use cases and best practices. And I think for that reason, it's easy to get started with it right away because there's not a huge learning curve to it. And Google also kind of optimizes the user interface to make it pretty intuitive and pretty easy to get started with setting it up on your website and digging into that data right away. So let's go over some basic terms that will help us understand GA and some of the basic things that it does. So the first thing we want to understand is what's the difference between a user and a session, and how do these relate to how Google tracks behavior on the internet? So the user represents an individual person, and the session can represent multiple instances of that user taking some activity like a page view on a website, downloading a file, playing a YouTube video, etc. So in this context, it's sort of a one-to-many kind of relationship where a single unique person can have multiple sessions. And the way that Google does that is by using what's called a tracking cookie. And so anytime that you have the Google script installed on your page, whether your dev team has like hard-coded that onto the web page, or you're using a system like Google Tag Manager, it fires a tag, or it fires a script, and that is basically recording a tracking event that Google is able to monitor. And it does this in real time across like billions and billions of data points on the internet at the same time. And so it's really powerful in the way that it does that. And with that, we're able to kind of break down some of the traffic channels so that when we see traffic coming into our website, we can break it down by, where is the traffic coming from? And so acquisition refers to the types of channels that are available. We have direct, which represents someone literally typing the website URL directly. It can also represent a bookmark. So if you've saved a link previously and you click a bookmark, that will count as a direct inbound link. In addition, we have organic and paid search. Those both appear very similar on a search engine like Google or Bing or something. Essentially, the only difference is that paid search is used by marketers to sort of put their search results at the top by paying a little bit of extra money to do so. Then you have referral traffic that refers to being linked to from an external website. Email traffic, which is kind of self-explanatory, it comes from an email link. And then social comes from any referral link that actually is coming from Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., any type of social media. Google's pretty good about sort of flagging that automatically as social rather than just a general link or referral link. The bounce rate is an important metric because it breaks down the percentage of people who visit, who they record a page view, but then they leave the website without taking further action, like clicking another link within the domain, executing some type of conversion activity like downloading a file, submitting a form, completing a purchase process. Essentially, the bounce rate can be used to determine how effective page engagement is and whether the inbound traffic is coming to the places that they're looking for. The higher the bounce rate, the more you might want to fine-tune your page to make sure that it's accurate to search results that you're optimizing for, or the types of advertising, whether it's paid advertising or like organic marketing strategy. You want to align those with content on the landing page to lower that bounce rate overall. And now let's go over some strategies for how to look at the types of reports that are available and how to make sense of them and how to answer important business questions from that data. So to understand the reports, we want to look at the 5 large report categories. And within each of these categories, there are a number of different types of reports that are available. But at the top level, you have 5 categories, which are real-time, which provide the current snapshot of the activity on the website. Audience, which answers questions about who is visiting, and these include demographics, interests, geolocation, and device type. Then we have acquisition, which we've talked a little bit about the channels, what channels are driving traffic. This includes search, social, referral, email, paid ads. Behavioral reports, which determine how your site is performing. These indicate things like your top performing pages, the site speed, how fast it loads, and frequent search terms. And then finally, conversions. These determine how many visitors are completing goals like product purchase or registration, file download. Conversions are things that you set up within GA to look for specific events that you deemed as important for your KPIs. So real-time reports, again, they give a snapshot of what's happening in real time. It's a snapshot of the web page and all the activity that's happening globally on your website. And so you see on the real-time report screen, high-level metrics like what are the top referrals, top active pages, top social inbound destinations. You see a device breakdown and current active users and page views in the last few minutes, like 26 to 30 minutes or so. This can be a useful report when you're trying to do like live testing, or you just launched a marketing campaign and you want to see, hey, what are my metrics looking at like right now? I think in general, it's a little bit less useful for monitoring like historic performance trends, only because it's literally non-historic. It's just what's happening right now. And so we don't use it super frequently, except for usually like doing some type of testing, making sure that when we set up tracking tags that they're firing correctly, and we can sort of monitor that in real time. The next report that's interesting is demographics and interests. These are both under the audience report. You'll find that this is actually able to, Google has some algorithms in place that are able to sort of guess at what it thinks the age, gender, and interest level of users that it's analyzing are. And so this is interesting because these metrics aren't coming from like user supplied, hey, I am a 25-year-old male. It's coming from Google analyzing their like behavior, their traffic history, and making a determination off of that. And so these results, you want to take them with a grain of salt, but they do give some interesting perspective in, like, for example, looking at this particular report, you can see that the largest source of traffic is the age range of 25 to 34, and it's heavily skewed towards the female population, which is very interesting because that will give you insight into how you plan your marketing strategies, the types of content and copy, the types of demographics you're trying to target. This can be very useful in you really answering questions around, well, who's visiting my site and who are the types of audiences that we want to reach. In a related type of report, also under the audience panel, is geo report or geolocation reporting. This can also be done through language as well. We can determine the language of people that are visiting based on their browser settings. But the location, I think, is based on IP, the IP address of the visitor. And so it presents a kind of visual diagram of a map, like a heat map. So we can see from here that the United States is kind of the largest source of traffic for this particular domain. We can also break that down with a tabular view, which gives us a little bit more insight into, like, if you look at the overall map, it's kind of dark blue and then a bunch of light blue. It doesn't give us a lot of differentiation. But from here, we can see, well, our top three trafficked companies are the United States, Canada, and India. And I think that might be maybe surprising to a marketer who was only, really targeting the United States market. There may be opportunities within this report to find, where are some emerging markets that we can start to, as part of the long tail of a marketing strategy, potentially reach out to. And another aspect of the geolocation report is that we can actually drill down into a country. So if we clicked on that USA map tab, we would get this breakdown by state. We can actually break this down further by county and region. But I think this is interesting, of course, as well, because if, for example, you were an East Coast-based marketer and you sent out a lot of social media posts and email campaigns, according to Eastern time, you're sending it around 9 or 10 a.m. on Eastern time zone, but your largest user base is actually in California. You might not be optimizing your scheduling for your highest group of potential audience members. And so this report can kind of give you some insight into, who should we be targeting and when should we be targeting people according to our strategies for deployment. The next report is under another audience report. This is the mobile device report. And in this case, we can see that 65% of this this domain's traffic is coming from mobile devices, phones, basically any small handheld device. And this is interesting because I think that it's going to impact your decisions about how do we optimize the design of the website. Are we trying to optimize for mobile, for desktop? And in this scenario, we definitely want to look at this report and say, we should be optimizing, primarily for mobile users because they're by far the biggest majority of users coming to the website. So we want to make sure that we're designing for mobile first best practices, using responsive design, and making sure that our page layouts are optimized for user experience on a cell phone as opposed to a desktop or a laptop view. Channels, we've discussed a little bit about where channels come from. And I think this report is under the acquisition panel. And this allows us to see a breakdown by, it lists the channels, and we can also see for each channel, the number of sessions, new users per channel, bounce rate, pages per session, and finally conversion. So we can see e-commerce conversion rate, how many transactions, and the total number of revenue. And so this is going to be a really important report in terms of determining our overall marketing mix. Should we be prioritizing email versus social? In this particular instance, social is way at the bottom of 7 with like 3% of the overall marketing mix in terms of actual traffic coming into the website. and email is by far the highest. Now, that might be an indicator that we're already prioritizing email over other channels, and there's an opportunity to grow the social part of the marketing mix. But it can also be an indicator that, where's my return on investment here if, the revenue from all social is really 1% of overall revenue versus 50% of revenue coming from email. So this is an important report to really determine, where's traffic coming from, where's the revenue coming from, breaking it down by each channel coming into the website. Next, we'll go over behavior reports. These are, again, another audience report. This breaks down some interesting metrics such as new versus returning. We can see the percentage of people who are first-time visitors to the website versus people who we've tracked them as visitors who visited already before, and so that would be a returning visitor. And that can answer questions around, are we growing in terms of new traffic, or is our outreach primarily capturing new viewers, or are we capturing an already existing audience who is coming back for repeated engagement? And how is our marketing strategy and our communication emphasizing one group versus the other? Next is frequency and recency. This is determining how often somebody makes a repeat visit. That would be frequency, and then recency is determined by the time frame for that last activity. So was it today, 2 days ago, a week ago, etc. And then finally, engagement is calculated by sessions and page views, as well as the duration of time on a page. So we can determine that a group of individuals who are spending the most time on page, the average time on page, and making the most page views are the demographics we want to target. And so these behavioral metrics give us some insight into how people are interacting with the domain. Assisted conversions are under the conversion report. This is an interesting metric because if we look at sort of the channel report, we can see revenue as a function of, this is called a last touch attribution. And so, for example, email revenue would be determined by a conversion is happening. In this case, it might be like a product purchase. So that product purchase was triggered by the last touch that was tracked with an email. But within a marketing campaign, someone might receive an email, they might see several postings on social media, they might do several organic searches, they might see paid search results. And so in an overall marketing mix, they're going to receive multiple touches of different elements, of different channels. And so this report kind of breaks down the assists, and that allows us to see, well, what is the, even if it's not the last touch, how is it contributing to the overall process of leading to conversions? So this can be a really important metric in terms of determining, maybe email maybe social networks aren't at the top performing last touch, but because they serve an important part of that sales funnel that we don't want to, overlook it. And so that can be an important metric for driving those types of decisions. And then finally, benchmarking. This allows us to compare metrics with others in the industry. So there's an option under this report to select an industry vertical. There's hundreds of different verticals that you can choose from, and Google will basically take an average of all of those different industries to compare your performance. In this case, performance in each channel against that industry average. So you can see at a glance, I'm performing 1,000% better in email channels than other people in the industry, but in display advertising, almost 98% worse. And so that might, give me some indication that if display is something I want to prioritize, then I'm not doing as good in that area. So let's go over some helpful tips and tricks. Annotations can be a really useful feature. It's basically the ability to put a text comment on a timeline, any type of timeline graph. And this can help provide some additional context for the numbers. So for example, here we have a certain peak in late September or early October of last year. And we can put in a text box and say, hey, this product was mentioned on Good Morning America at this time, which would be a metric we're not collecting, via GA, but we can provide some additional context into, hey, there was some important news that came about to drive this traffic spike. And that can help, provide context for business stakeholders and other reporting people that are looking at these metrics. Secondly, custom alerts allow us to set up they allow us to set up a notification on some particular threshold of activity. A common use case that we will implement is like a no order alert. So if we're expecting that at least one order should happen on an e-commerce website per day, and that doesn't occur, we can immediately get a notification that we would need to look into why that's happening. It might be that Google Analytics, the tagging is not firing. Maybe a developer made some change and now that's not firing as we're expecting. Or it could be a problem with the cart checkout process. There are a number of issues that we might want to look into, but this would kind of be that canary in a coal mine a little bit that will give us an immediate signal that we need to do some troubleshooting there. And then we can share and automate those reports. So outside of alerts, we can have regular scheduled reports on important, any type of report that we create in GA. We can export that as a CSV, as a PDF, and provide that in an emailed format to whatever stakeholders need to receive this information. And then some ways that we can take this process further with advanced analytics with BI and business intelligence. So one of the really cool tools that we use at WhereWare is called Domo. This is a BI tool that allows us to combine and integrate multiple data sources, one of which is GA, Google Analytics. And we can combine that data with CRM data from Salesforce, for example, email data like that we would get from Silverpop or Salesforce Marketing Cloud, e-commerce like Shopify or payment gateways like Stripe or Square, SQL databases and Excel. And we can collect all the information from, literally hundreds and thousands of different types of data sources. And we can generate these 360-degree complete view reports of an entire digital operation. So rather than being restricted only to GA's form of web analytics that are kind of anonymized, we can really see, we can drill down to the user level performance. We can see, for example, James Guittard, clicked this email on this date. It led to this conversion, so we can break things down in a much more detailed and granular level and combine that with analytics from other platforms to really tie into our email campaign strategy, our e-commerce performance, and when products are purchased, we can see abandoned carts and things like that. All sorts of really important data points that we wouldn't necessarily get with GA alone. And so if you have questions about Domo, feel free to reach out after this call, and we can definitely set you up with a demo and show you some of the cool things that we can do there and some interesting case studies. If you want to learn more about GA and Google Analytics, some cool places that you can look are the WhereWare blog, where we frequently post about analytics and other topics. You can find the GA Academy, which is Google's official kind of training program for GA, and you can get certified with Google for free. And then there's also the official support documentation, which is a little bit less of a tutorial-based thing, but that's where you're going to find, if you want to dive deep into really what all the functionality available is in the tool, that's where you're going to find it in the official documentation. So let's wrap up with some key takeaways. The first thing that you want to do when working with GA is to make sure that your website is ready, that you've got either Google Tag Manager set up properly, or you've got those the JavaScript tags that are set up on each page. You want to make sure that you're collecting analytics everywhere that you're expecting to be monitoring and measuring performance. And then you want to set goals with your team. You want to make sure that business performance indicators are being measured, and that the types of reporting that you're looking at in GA are going to lead to insight in answering those questions. So we can customize and manage reports that you want and actually need. There's a lot available in GA. It can become a little bit overwhelming, but the beauty of the platform is it's totally customizable. you can totally customize every report that you have and base it on what your KPIs actually are. We want to be able to track activities on all channels, including desktop, mobile, and tablet, and see how those differ and how we can measure them against one another. And we want to pay attention to the audience's behavior. This is really important when it comes to any type of strategy planning, and we want to understand how people are actually interacting with our platform and not how we imagine they would interact. And so it allows us to set up experiments and tests and see what's actually happening and how people are actually responding. And so lastly, GA is a non-destructive platform. You can create reports and views of different dashboards that are non-destructive, so you won't mess up any of the underlying data. So don't be afraid of kind of playing around and doing some investigation into how to set up those reports to your liking, and so go ahead and get started and play around. If you need any hands-on help, definitely email sales@wearware.com to set up a free 30-minute consult with our customer insights team, which I'm a member of. This is a limited time offer. It expires on September 25th, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have at this time. And if you have more in-depth requirements, feel free to send an email and we can set up a review session. So thanks for watching, everybody. I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Sarah to review some questions that have been asked during the webinar.
Great, thank you, James. It looks like we have a bunch of questions here, so we'll probably just answer one now, so everybody can get back on with their day. And like James said, we'll follow up with you directly with whatever questions that you have. So thank you for submitting those. Let's take the question from Kelly. How can we track individual user customer behavior in Google Analytics?
So that's a good question. The short answer is you can't. Google Analytics does not allow for personally identifiable information to be stored and collected within GA itself. Now, there are ways that we can implement analytics that do allow us to track identifiable information down to an email address or a CRM, a user ID, that kind of thing. I discussed one of them already when we talked about Domo. So that's something if you're interested in integrating GA with a platform that allows for that type of personally identifiable information, that's one option. And then another, if you want to stay within the Google ecosystem, is with Google Big Data. BigQuery allows for that type of matching of customer information. But again, it's a data integration project. Nothing out of the box in GA allows for PII. It's against the rules.
Great. Well, for all other questions, again, we'll follow up with you directly via email. And thank you for joining us. Thanks, James.